Good afternoon. I'm really pleased to be here today. I'm really honored to have been asked to join this conference. I want to start by saying that I started working on GFMIS with the Ministry of Finance. It occurred to me today that it's been 20 years now. 20 years ago we started working on this, and I'm really impressed that what's been developed up to now and what's been achieved so far is so impressive, and that we're talking about this at this level today. So I just want to give a hand to everyone who's been involved. It really is an impressive accomplishment, and I think we're in the middle of a journey that's going to continue as we go along. When Mr. Mai first talked to me about this conference, about what the topic was, I immediately thought of presenting on this Brunei project that we just completed. But I wasn't sure what aspects of the project to talk about. I could talk about technology, I could talk about functionality, I could talk about a lot of things, and what I ended up deciding to talk about is probably the least sexy part of building that system, which is all the challenges in actually getting the system up and running and actually implementing the project. So bear with me if it's not all that exciting and it's not nice technical stuff like we're listening to. It's really pretty straightforward lessons learned about how to get systems up and running. So I think we can all agree, that technology is indeed a very powerful enabler for public financial management and for public sector transformation as a whole. The problem is that you only get those benefits if you actually implement and build the system successfully. Our business is full of failed projects, failed systems, where money was invested and nothing was returned, or very little was returned. So it's really important that when we decide to make these investments, that we make sure we do it right and we get the thing running and we achieve that success. So what we have learned from this Brunei project is a number of lessons. That project and many others, you all know these, I'm sure, very well, but I can't help but reiterate them now because they're so important, and we see so many efforts where people don't remember these lessons and they don't actually follow them. So what I'll do is I'll talk a bit about the system itself. I'll just describe to you the program, and then we'll talk about these lessons briefly. So the purpose of the e-payment gateway program in Brunei was really to extend more channels to payers to pay their bills and to improve the process of reconciliation, reconciling transactions as they were coming through. So I'll just read, it's on the slide, but I'll just read through quickly what the initial objective was as stated in the RFP for the consulting services where we began. So the objective was to deliver a secure common payment gateway to be utilized by all government agencies involved in revenue collections to conduct secure online payment transactions, which at the same time will ease financial transaction within and across government agencies, as well as the private sector agencies concerned. The facilities will enable and catalyze the delivery of e-government services. So try to remember those objectives as we go through. They expected some key benefits that they expected, certainly more automation, new e-payment services to citizens, improved efficiency of existing payment collection and reconciliation processes, coverage. They wanted 100% reporting of all the transactions made, no missing data as happens when things are manual. They want to reduce errors as happens when things are manual, and they want to shorten the time it took for reconciling all the transactions. The project went through about the same phases you would expect these projects to go through. There was a program objectives and design phase. There was a procurement phase where the SI and the solution provider was chosen. Then there was the implementation where the system was actually developed and all the processes and process change took place. And then there was finally the implementation where we went live and we went through a bit of a shadow period, which I'll talk about in a minute. services, the land transport department, which did all the licensing and all the vehicle management, the revenue department, of course, which collects the taxes, and then the post office as well, because the post office is a channel for people to make payments in Brunei to various utilities. They can pay through the post office. Unfortunately, about halfway through, the customs department, we worked hard on it, but they had issues with their existing vendor and proprietary issues with the software, so that was going to get into a big long negotiation, and so we had to drop them from the initial rollout. Then the land transport department also had a number of systems they were trying to launch at the same time, so we ran into some conflicts with resources there, so they dropped out as well. So we ended up with 3 builders on board in the initial phase, and then 4 banks. 4 banks, 2 international, one was HSBC, one was Standard Chart, and then 2 local banks, Minority Bank and BIDB. So what I'll do, I won't read through all of these slides. I won't cover everything on the slides since you have that material, but I'll just touch on the main points in each one. So what is the EPG itself? It's a payment scheme, and what happens is if you look on the diagram, starting with the payer, they can pay at whatever channels are available to them through their bank. Some of the channels are their own banks, some of them, as I said, are the post office, some of them are directly to the biller agency, power company or revenue or whatever it happens to be. Then what happens is that information gets transmitted through the system electronically to the biller's bank through either a card network or interbank network, and then also directly from the biller agency. They would transfer that to the bank where they make their deposits. Then all that gets reported in by the biller's bank to the payment gateway, and the payment gateway passed down to the treasury. A little closer look at it, so you understand what the benefit was, is that initially what was happening is the banks were informing the billers on paper or on spreadsheets or in a number of ways, reporting to them what they were collecting. And then the banks would then, the billers would then process all of that and add it to what they collected or the information they had, submit all that to the payments unit in the treasury. And then the payments unit would spend a lot of time reconciling all that, because they got one set of information from the banks and one set of information from the billers themselves, and they had to reconcile all that before they could enter it into TAFIS, which is the Brunei equivalent of TAFIS. It's the government account system. So, but after we built EPG, everything became electronic. All of it was automated, and EPG generated reports back and forth. So when banks would report into EPG, billers would report into EPG, the gateway would automatically reconcile, and if it couldn't reconcile, it would automatically return transactions back to the banks and the billers, or missed transactions, missing revenue codes, missing data, and then that would go back and forth through EPG until it was all reconciled, and then it would all be passed through the TAFIS at 100% reconciliation. So there really was improvement, a significant improvement in the process. I just got a couple of quick, very high-level diagrams of the system itself. The system had some captive capabilities that were built as part of EPG. The system also it leveraged what was already there. EGNC is what they call the E-Government National Center. They had responsibility for the government data center, and there was the main production site was on their premises. The DR site was on other premises, but still managed by EGNC. The banks connected to all this through something called the Business Partner Link, which was the telephone company set up a system so that private sector agencies could connect to the government network with the right security, and the billers all connected through the existing government network. So you have a number of capabilities, and down at the bottom you see the Tel Group, which is the telephone company, and they were the SI of the project. Our role was program management. And CAS, Card Access Services, is an Australian company that provided the solution. So they all connected themselves directly for support and for maintenance. The next slide just talks a bit about some of the captive capabilities that were built into the system. The compute, Brunei is a very small country, so you don't see a lot of transactions coming through, so that gives you an opportunity to do some virtualization, so you can save on compute power. And so they had a fairly heavy virtualized server environment. Same with network communications, that was virtualized, so you could put additional security on certain segments of the network and leave other certain segments open. Storage was all there, as you would expect, also virtualized. And then security, of course, was state-of-the-art. It was all fully encrypted, some hardware security models, HSMs. There was PKI infrastructure in place. So it was really, did leverage all of the most recently modern technologies. So by the time we cut over to production, EPG was processing about 18,000 payments on a weekly basis, which probably isn't very much. That's probably enough for one small town in Vietnam. But in fact, it covered the whole of Brunei. And it was reconciling at greater than 90% success rate right off the bat. And the object was, as I mentioned earlier, what would happen before is the information would all come into the treasury, and they would have to spend a long time dealing with the builders and the banks to figure out where the breaks in the reconciliation were. And so getting to 100% reconciliation for a given period took almost maybe a month before they could actually say, yep, we reconciled all the transactions for that period. And then, so the measure of the success of EPG was how much you could reduce that time, because you weren't going to get all that. It wasn't all going to be reconciled instantaneously, because there would be issues with banks and builders and what was collected and what was deposited. So it took some time, but the idea was to reduce that down to limited few days, or even a couple of days before you could say for that period to reconcile. This probably isn't very interesting, except for people who do this, who are in treasury units who do this for a living. So I hope some of you are, so that's interesting. Okay. So we've been talking about benefits to the payers, and benefits to the agencies, and benefits to the ministry. But when you think about it, and again, this is part of the strategic view that we would have when we talk about GFMIS, which is what are the benefits to the society, the economy, and the nation as a whole. And what we've learned is that when you do something like this, you really do generate valuable benefits at a really broad level. You have increased convenience for citizens and businesses. They can pay in more ways. They can have more security. They have increased trust in electronic payments, which in a society like Brunei, and probably I think in Vietnam too, you have a lot of mistrust in electronic payment. You're kind of nervous about paying things online, or having money directly pulled out of your bank account and give it to someone else. So it's important to build up that trust in the population as well. It is a foundation infrastructure for national payment processing. There's a settlement system is in the works for the central bank, for the monetary authority, and so now they'll be able to link straight into that payments gateway instead of dealing with banks separately. They can do it all in one place. And of course, increased transparency, because it was all online and put in the system. Okay, let's talk a bit about what we need to do to make sure that we get what we did on this project in most cases, although it wasn't all smooth and didn't all go easily. But these are just some of the lessons, and I say some because there are many, and these are just a few that I pulled out that are important to talk about to make sure we pay attention to when we embark on building new components of GFMIS or start from scratch. Specific solutions have to be conceived and designed and developed within the context of a broader IT strategy, not just IT strategy, but business strategy. And then enterprise architecture based on that, and an IT blueprint for the organization as a whole. Whether you decide on what that scale is, if you can do it for the whole ministry or for the whole financial management function, that's great. In some cases, you can do it for a whole government, but it's a bit modular when you do it for a whole government. In any case, it's something you have to look at before you start to build specific solutions. Solutions need to be deployed within the framework of effective governance and management structure. A robust vendor selection and contracting process needs to be critical to ensure productive collaboration. All participating entities must fully participate in program activities from start to finish. And an incremental rollout to production, including the shadow of parallel run, enables course corrections or application of components to full system deployment. Some of these things, you remember this morning, Mr. Nâng talked about, he was the only one this morning actually to raise the idea of obstacles to getting GFMIS built. And he had a big long list, and I think some of these address the list that he was talking about. And these are ways that you overcome these obstacles. And you should see them as obstacles to overcome, not complete roadblocks, and so you don't do what you want to do. So I only have a few minutes, but I'll just touch real briefly on each one of them. The first one has to do again with the overarching architecture and strategy. You have to have a strategy for your organization. You have to know what your strategic outcomes are before you start to build. And then when you know what that is, you know what business capabilities you have to develop in order to achieve those strategic outcomes. So when you know what business capabilities you need, you also know what IT capabilities you need. IT capabilities are driven by business capabilities are driven by strategy. So you've got to put that in place and develop a blueprint for the whole organization before you start to build specific systems. Otherwise, you end up with disparate infrastructure, you end up with applications standing on their own, you end up with a lot of things that are totally separate and not integrated in any way. Program management is critical. You have to have effective governance structures and program management in place if you expect to succeed. In Brunei, we had a steering committee, we had a number of high-level committees. You see in the middle of this diagram, in the gray area, that's the actual delivery capability. There's a PMO, there's the management from the Ministry of Finance, and then there's the SI. And that was our team where we actually delivered, but we all reported in and participated in these other committees. And then under that, some working groups where we had people in. Procurement, I won't go into a lot of that. We know the process, RFPs, evaluation, shortlisting, negotiation, contract signing, all those are kind of the same in most countries. You have a system put together. What we did differently in Brunei is instead of selecting the best technical and financial proposal and negotiating with that vendor, we selected the best three and we called them all in to negotiate. We literally negotiated with three of them, knowing we were only going to sign with one. Because the negotiation process wasn't really just negotiation. It had to do with reviewing the technical proposal, reviewing the requirements again, reviewing the cost, looking at the commercials, looking at all aspects of their proposal and their tender and our requirements, and making sure they were aligned. And then after that session, we sent them back and said, okay, prepare the best and final offer. Now you have a better understanding of what we need. Go back and prepare exactly what you think you can deliver to us. And it ended up, what it did was it aligned things, and I think this is also one of the ones that Mr. Nâng said was a problem. Misaligned expectations, misunderstood requirements. You can resolve a lot of those issues before you ever start your project if you do that first. And some procurement processes allow it, some are very rigid and don't, so it's a bit difficult in some environments. But if you can stay flexible enough to do that, it's advisable. So, in terms of participation of all the entities, remember when you build a system that links a lot of different organizations together and have interfaces across a bunch of different agencies or companies, in our case we have banks, and banks are very particular about how they do upgrades and releases and interfaces with any systems. They're very, very cautious about that. You have to remember they have projects with all these phases themselves. So in a bank, they know how to do it, they're pretty good at it. In government building agencies, not so much. And some of them needed help, some of them didn't quite have the internal capacity to do it, so we had to support those as well. So if you're aware that that's going on, you have to pay attention to it. This, on the darker boxes, you see the forums that the entities also participated in, all the way through the project. The program delivery subcommittee was where the managers, project managers were involved. The technology working groups had the IT people in there all along. So we had constant interaction, constant overlap, and constant supervision of all of these agencies that we were connecting to the Ministry of Finance to make sure that when when the time came for SIT and UAT, they were ready to go and they were ready to start. And that's really, really important. Again, those of you who built systems before, although someone mentioned that they went Big Bang in Korea, I think it was, Korea, that requires an immense amount of discipline to go Big Bang with a system across the whole big government. Typically what you want to do, and I think we did that in Tapnis, you roll it out in phases. You roll it out, number one, you run some parallel runs. You don't just shut down your current system one day to the next and roll over the next your new one, because if you have issues, rolling back can be really expensive. Pulling it all back can be very expensive. So we put together what we call a shadow run, where we went live, we went into production with all the agencies. They started funneling their information into the payments gateway. Payments gateway did the reconciliation, processed it through to TAFIS, but we didn't pick it up in TAFIS yet. We kept using manual statements. And it was a big ask for them because we had to have them do both. And we ran it for about 3 weeks so we were sure we were stable before we were comfortable dropping the manual processes and moving just to the system. So it really helped a lot because during that period we had a lot of teething pains, a lot of problems that we resolved before we went into full production, and we saved ourselves a lot of trouble. Again, phased approach. We only had 3 billers. There are 72 government biller agencies in Brunei, of which probably only about 20 actually have systems that you can integrate. Most of them are still very manual, very small, and they send things into Treasury in paper, and probably will for a long time. But there's a good 20-25 agencies with sophisticated systems that we will be adding to the payments gateway as we go along. And that's, so we're starting with just 3 or 4, and it's really important to make sure you know you've got the system right, the system's working, the people are working, the processes are working, then you start adding people to it. So that's all I had today. Just a few reminders that I think are really important lessons for anyone embarking on GFMIS or any IS development for that matter. Target state IT blueprinting is critical. Make sure you know what your vision is for the end before you start, or you'll run into trouble in the middle. Governance and program management can't be overstated. You have to manage all aspects of the program to keep it going and make sure it succeeds. Vendor selection and contracting goes without saying. Full entity participation. Parallel running and parallel. All these I think are intuitive. I think everybody knows that they're important. I wouldn't be standing up here talking about them today and taking your time if I didn't think many times they get overlooked or they get shortcut because of resources or time or pressure and people don't actually go through the process. But they're critical, and if you pay attention to them, you will save yourselves a lot of headaches getting these systems on the ground. Thank you very much.